I joined the company in 85 as a board member. So my father was a very detail-oriented person, while Dr. Reddy was a big picture man. So I learned to see the trees and the forest and be able to see both. Satish and me have been in this company for decades together, and we don't agree on everything, but we've never used the company to further our personal agenda or his personal agenda or my personal agenda. The unique recipe for Sun was acquiring companies at low valuation and turning them around. And you have to give it to them. They were brilliant at it, and we were not so good at it. People say, Russia has attacked Ukraine. What are you doing about it? Our commitment is to Russian patients. Ukrainian patients will serve both. It's not for us to take a political stand. Maybe we didn't put enough focus on India. But yeah, if I had to relive this, I would have spent more time in it. We were one of the earliest companies in drug discovery. We still don't have anything substantial to show for it. That is probably a disappointment. Hiring the right people is the most important work for a CEO. And of course, firing the wrong people. I did the hiring part well. The firing, maybe I didn't do a great job.
That's GV Prasad, co-chairman and managing director of Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, India's third largest pharma company with a market cap of over $13 billion. It's believed in business that a company is not very different from the way its promoter is. And Dr. Reddy's is a fitting example of that. This Hyderabad-based company, founded in 1984 by the noted scientist Dr. Anji Reddy, stands out in the pharma pack for its focus on governance and innovation. Right from listing on the stock market within 2 years of incorporation, to being the undeclared CEO factory of the Indian pharma industry, to possibly being the only one to have an expat CEO, Dr. Reddy's has a record of doing things differently from its peers. The company also has had its fair share of challenges, be it about a big bang foreign acquisition not having worked out, or efforts on drug discovery that are yet to pay off. But it is one of the few companies, again, that is candid about its failures. So in today's episode of the Morning Brief, from the Economic Times, I, Kiran Somvanshi, along with my colleague Arijit Burman, sit with Mr. Prasad for a candid chat on what clicked and what didn't for Dr. Reddy's on the very day the company completed 40 years of its operations. This is the Morning Brief. So India's third largest pharma company is completing 40 years. So congratulations, Prasad.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
As a company's co-chairman and managing director, how do you look back at the journey?
I joined the company in 85 as a board member, and I became a full-time employee in 1990. So it's 34 years. So it's been a phenomenal journey from the day we started this company. There have been a series of evolutions, turning points. It's not been a linear journey like any other company. We've had our challenges, we had our highs, we had our lows. So it was like a roller coaster ride.
So talking about those struggles, what have been the hits and the misses, so to say, in this journey?
We started as an active ingredient company. We were earlier on recognized as a company which brings new products into the market, makes it available for other formulators and for the patients. That was the birth of the company. From there, we evolved into a formulations company first, and then into biologics, services, and of course, looking at innovation. So, in most of these businesses, we made reasonable progress. We achieved great success in the major markets of US, India, Europe, Russia. So, in that sense, all these are a matter of pride for us. Also, being one of the first companies in drug discovery, we invested a lot in innovation. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot to show for it. We were the earliest, one of the earliest companies in drug discovery. We still don't have anything substantial to show for it. That is probably a disappointment as I look back. And also, if you see Dr. Reddy, when he wrote his biography, the title was The Unfinished Agenda. And I think we still have that unfinished agenda in front of us. In the business of branded formulations, we've done great in emerging markets. India, we could have done a lot better. I think we had many things to focus on. So India didn't get the focus it required or deserved in the early days. But today we are very focused on India, and India is a very important, pivotal part of our journey. Biologics is something we also entered very early, but we unfortunately did not pursue the for big markets of Europe and US initially, and that has also an area of disappointment for us. But in APIs, in generics, we have done very well. We've done well in the important markets of US, Europe, Russia, emerging markets, and India. So that's broadly where we are today.
So you mentioned earlier that you have been part of the company since 1985. How has that journey been? How have you grown kind of with the company?
So in 85 to 90, I was not in an executive role. I was on the board, but my role was only in governance in that sense. But I think in the initial days, not having a lot of professional experience, being a part of the promoter family, the learning was very important to me to deal with the company's challenges. And in 90, when I took on a full time role in one of the group companies in Cheminor Drugs, I started with a crisis where the top management had left the company and the company was disrupted in some ways. So that whole experience gave me a lot of learning as well as motivation in how to build a company which is sustainable, resilient, and does not depend on a few individuals. And today I'm happy to say that Dr. Reddy's is well recognized in at least three areas: science and technology, people practices. Many of our people have gone on to become CEOs of many companies around the world. And of course, governance. And we're recognized for good governance. And we have an amazing set of board members.
I have several questions on a lot of things that you just spoke, but I think I'll pass it on to Arijit, who has a lot of questions about you before we jump onto the company.
And good morning, Mr. Prasad. But first, before actually we continue this conversation, it's already riveting. I want to step back a bit and, we'll talk a lot about DRL and the 40 years, but, you know, you can't take out the key management personnel out of that story as well. Now, and I want to go back to your family history. Your father had a variety of businesses from real estate, construction, hotels, I think a spinning mill, if I'm not mistaken. Between 83 and 85, if I'm not mistaken, you ran your own pharma entrepreneurial journey, which incidentally was next door to the plant, to the DRL plant at that point in time. Then you, of course, got married, I think, and Dr. Reddy's, DRL acquired Benzex Lab. That was the name of the
Yes,
company, your
yes.
company?
I'm very impressed by the amount of detail you have in your mind. Amazing.
No. But my question actually to start with is, would you say that behind every successful man, there is actually a woman?
There is a woman, there's other men, and there are many people. So success is never one person. It belongs to many, many people. A person sitting at the top maybe gets undue credit. So I would not say that this is in any way just linked to me. There are many people who contributed. We stand on the shoulders of giants. You talked a lot about my father. My father also produced a movie. Just an interesting tidbit. It was a Telugu movie called Vamsavruksham, and Anil Kapoor was the hero in that movie. It's a Telugu movie. That was his first movie. Not many people know this. He was called Anil Kumar in that movie.
So Anil Kapoor actually made his film debut in a Telugu film and not a Hindi film. Oh, wow. This is fantastic trivia. That is truly, truly fantastic. But you actually didn't join DRL right away. What went back to join your father's
Yeah.
business? Why was that?
My father was an entrepreneur in the true sense. He started many businesses, failed in some, succeeded in some, but overall did well. I started actually working with him in the construction business. That was my first job. I was at a construction site, learned about building canals, dams, powerhouses with him, and I was in that journey. And then we started this business. It was to make a bulk active product, and it was located next door to Dr. Reddy's, with Dr. Reddy's first plant, first API plant. So neither my father nor me had a lot of understanding of this business, and we quickly were losing money. And my father was always very sharp in when we were losing money, he would get rid of the business. So while the business was there, I think Dr. Reddy's were looking for a increased capacity. This plant was next door. He knew my father knew him. So the plant ended up going to Dr. Reddy's, and I went back to our traditional construction business for a while. But I had joined the board at Dr. Reddy's at that time. In this interim period, I also was meeting him often, and he was explaining things to me. I didn't understand why at that time. He was spending a lot of time just telling me about details about the business, mostly about the R&D. That's what was exciting for him. And in that process, I really didn't realize at that time, but I built my own curiosity and passion for science.
I wanted to ask you, in this journey from $30 million DRL to $13 billion of DRL, what has changed and what has not?
So what has changed, I think, is in the early days we were very entrepreneurial. We were fast action, round the clock working, and that entrepreneurial startup environment has its energy and speed, and all of that. And also risk taking was much higher. Today I think we are large, we are listed, we have to consider all risks to of all and all stakeholders, and hence there is a certain amount of procedure, process, compliance which is required. So that is the change from an agile, speed, fast to somewhat predictable, measured, managing risks, and taking a holistic perspective. That is one change.
Right.
The second change is when we started early, we were just a local company. Today, it's very different. We have employees from 42 different countries. We have offices around the world. There is a certain culture which is global, and how we think about things. So that from a local to a global, from a entrepreneurial to a professional organization. So it has evolved in many ways. The third thing which has somewhat changed is in the beginning, we were very focused on profitability, making the ends meet, doing that. But today, we look at things in a much longer perspective. We look at sustainability, we look at gender equity, environment, climate change. So, a whole lot of complexity has come into how we do things. But what has not changed, I think, is our passion for science. I forgot to mention, in the early days also, we were a pioneer. We would always launch products first, be recognized for new products. In the medium term, that has somewhat, dulled, that edge has, come down. But we're coming back and saying that that is something we want to do repeatedly and not lose that edge. So that pioneership is still, an important part of our journey. Science and technology has always been part of our DNA. Dr. Reddy himself was a scientist, and like I said, he built that passion in all of us for science, for learning, for improving, and that science and technology continues to be an important pillar. The second one is people practices. So we have taken risks, hired people from different backgrounds, and it has paid off for us, and that the organization has deep pools of talent. And so that hasn't changed people practices. The third one is about governance. The governance thing really started after when we listed the company, and we had stakeholders from across the world when we were listed in the US. So we used the opportunity to raise our levels of compliance to a stage of to a level of excellence where governance becomes a distinctive feature for running the company. So these are the three things which have been relatively constant over the last two to 3 decades.
And I have to tell you, you've given Kiran the perfect cue, because, and you will understand why.
So, the moment you said three things and governance was part of that, I was almost like tempted to ask you this. When I started tracking pharma, way back in 2006, 7, soon after that, Satyam scandal happened in 2009. Then there were also a few Hyderabad-based pharma companies which had kind of been pulled up for poor governance and all. So there was an impression about, Hyderabad-based companies. But Dr. Reddy's, ever since I have tracked, Dr. Reddy's has kind of been really the exception on that front. So how do you see that? Why it has kind of remained that exception?
So, firstly, I think you're very right about Hyderabad. I I won't say this, but Delhi, Hyderabad have some shared culture about flamboyant lifestyles, building mansions, driving fancy cars, and all that. In that pursuit of personal wealth, personal lifestyle versus institution building, we've seen some scandals from emanate from here. But I think things have improved since then. I don't know. Somehow, we as a company, we are not very flamboyant in our personal lives. We like to keep a low profile. We like to, be grounded, humble, but think big. But think big for the business. But personally, I don't see any of our leaders in that personal glorification or personal enrichment. I mean, we are rich. We are not promoters. They've made a lot of money, but the culture is not to be flashy, to be high ended, but really to be grounded. And that has helped us think objectively. Satish and me have been in this company for decades together, and we don't agree on everything. It's possible I have a different view, he has a different view, and we always have these arguments. But we've never used the company to further our personal agenda or his personal agenda or my personal agenda. The rule for us as promoters has been always do what is good for the company, and that dictates the decision making for us. And we also felt if you create value for all stakeholders, for the shareholders, for the employees, for the customers, for the vendors, for the bankers, all of them, you create long term sustainable value. If you start trading off the interests of one group of shareholders against the other, or just pursue the interests of promoters or stakeholders or shareholders at the cost of the other stakeholders, it won't last. And I think that is what has happened to some of the companies which failed, that they disproportionately put their attention on the share price or on the personal wealth of promoter. Then you take shortcuts to do that, and it comes back to bite you.
Right. No, you mentioned that you have thought big as a company. Not only big, I think you've also thought different in the sense that you professionalized your management much earlier than most other companies. And not only professionalized, you got an expat CEO, which again, not many companies have kind of thought of. So, how have been those choices come about?
I was close to 60, 59, and 58 or so when I hired Erez. I was looking for succession for me. And I looked internally, and there were a couple of candidates, but somehow it didn't feel the right person was ready to take on the mantle from me. However, one of my friends over a call told me, there's this guy who was in Teva. He was considered very good, but he didn't get the top job. But he was running a nutrition company at that time. He's available. Do you want to talk to him? I said, yeah, of course. And that's how I met Erez. And I asked him if he's interested, and he said, yes, of course, I'm interested. And he said that, Dr. Reddy's used to be one of our fiercest competitors in the API business. And learned how to compete with Dr. Reddy's and all that. And then he came to Hyderabad. We met in one of the hotels, and the chemistry clicked. And I said, yeah. And for me, the criteria was the next stage for Dr. Reddy's is to manage scale, manage accountability driven outcomes. And the person who has done all this was better for me than somebody who thinks he can do it. And so I found errors, and it worked, and just went ahead with him. And the board was very supportive. The board helped me bring him in, and that's how it happened. So that's errors. But in general, I think I've always been thinking about people as my primary job, and I always had that belief that hiring the right people is the most important work for a CEO, and of course, firing the wrong people. I did the hiring part well. The firing, maybe I didn't do a great job, but this is, I think, the rest is detail, execution, implementation, accountability, all that. But if you have the right people, the right team, the right motivation, the right values, a company is in very safe hands. And that's the philosophy with which we built the bench. We couldn't accommodate everybody's aspirations, so many of them have left and are leading other companies, and I'm very proud of that. Last count, at least we had 10 CEOs worldwide who had their work, who had evolved from Dr. Reddy's, and that was very satisfying for me.
Right. It's like Dr. Reddy's being the CEO of factory for Indian pharma.
I would like to think so, but not. I mean, I also want to be humble that we have work to do.
But honestly, can't visualize you firing people. Hiring I can understand, but you firing, that picture doesn't sit well. I mean, or can't really fathom that.
I must admit that I have fired people, but in a very gentle way. So when we merged Keminar and Dr. Reddy's, we had several people surplus in the leadership positions, but they were all good people, had the right values, but they were not for the future of the company. So I said, I must help them find other ways, and some of them went on to become very successful businessmen. We helped them set up something with initial capital or connections, business, customers, all that, and some of them have done really well. That is one thing. The other thing is I have fired people quite abruptly also, but that was not due to for performance, but for values violation. And that to me was very clear when I found somebody violating some of the values of the company. We took immediate action. So on competence, you are probably right. I didn't act very decisively when I should, in hindsight, but on values I did. So I can say that.
The one thing, since you mentioned Keminor, and the Keminor was headed by Dr. Murli Divi. So it would have been, is it possible, like anytime, do you see any collaboration between Divi's lab and Dr. Reddy's?
I have nothing against any of my ex-colleagues or competitors. I do business with all of them. We have bought products from them. We have sold products from them. We have sold products from Hetero, who's also left Dr. Reddy's, and MSN, all of them. We work with all of our competitors. The industry is very unique in that sense. The word almost incestuous. You can be a competitor, you can be a customer, you can be a collaborator, you can be suing each other all at the same time. So this is how the industry is. I kept that kind of an open mind. We also don't look at geopolitics, for example. People keep saying China, China, China. I said, you know, we are committed to patients in China. We are committed to buying the right product at the right price, the right quality. We shouldn't worry about geopolitics. People say, Russia has attacked Ukraine. What are you doing about it? I say, we're nothing. Our commitment is to Russian patients. Ukrainian patients will serve both. It's not for us to take a political stand, especially in global politics.
The other thing was about, you mentioned earlier that you got listed quite early. Within 2 years of the company getting incorporated, you went in for a listing. Same thing, even US listing was quite early. What prompted these decisions?
We were capital hungry. We had so many plans and we didn't have enough money coming from operations to fund all our plans. So we diluted very early in our evolution. In hindsight, maybe we shouldn't have, but that's what it was. At that time, we were more ambitious about growth and the needs for capital were high. So we went repeatedly to the capital market and diluted ourselves.
So does that worry you in the sense that low promoter holding over the period of time?
I mean, there's no right answer. I can't change the past. We are okay with where we are. We are comfortable. We have 27%, and then we as long as we create enough value and the share price is high, it should be fine.
No, I guess why Kiran's asking this question is because, many people, if you talk to analysts or, people who track the equity markets or bankers, or they would say perhaps what is stopping DRL from doing something transformative is if you were to merge with somebody similar size, larger, a little smaller, there could be perfect complementarity. There could be like a marriage made in heaven, but you will get so diluted into single digits. That's what's stopping DRL from doing something really transformative? Is there merit in that?
There is merit in that. There is obviously substance in that. But so far, I've not seen such a deal that I wanted to do and I couldn't do. So we've been able to fund the deals that we had with this, with cash and other ways. We've not come across a deal which we couldn't do so far.
And this, you would say, includes Cipla as well?
I can't comment on a deal which didn't happen or which won't happen at this time. But I don't think anything that we wanted to do was stopped by our low promoter holding.
The other thing was, some past decisions, like you started off, very aggressively on APIs, rather probably one of the earliest Indian companies to do so. But at the same time, there were companies like Sun Pharma, Cipla, who had focused on formulations. So do you think in the hindsight, had you also focused early on formulations, you would have got the kind of toehold which Sun Pharma has today or Cipla has today in India?
So Cipla is a much older company, and I can't compare with them. They're 70 years old, and their focus was India, and they did a great job. Sun, I think, is the unique recipe for Sun was acquiring companies at low valuation and turning them around. And you have to give it to them. They were brilliant at it, and we were not so good at it. It's not a matter of focusing on any given market, but how they executed it would be the thing. Because we were also in a domestic market fairly early on, but then we shifted a lot of focus to the US. In building that, maybe we didn't put enough focus on India. At one point, we were number 6 in India. It's just 20 years back, 25 years back. But yeah, if I had to relive this, I would have spent more time in India.
Yes. And you also went in as a company for Beta Farm, Germany's leading farm, one of the pharma companies, and that acquisition kind of didn't, go through well. It was at that time when it happened, it was the most expensive acquisition which Indian company had. So how do you look at that?
I mean, we've said this in public that this was not the best move for us. The market changed from being a branded market to a tender driven market driven by sick funds in Germany. And the value of the brands that we acquired was not meaningful post that transition of the market. And also, we had some supply chain challenges with Hexal not supplying us at that time. A number of things didn't go well. And we took a write off in those years.
But has that prevented Dr. Reddy's now to kind of go ahead and do something what Sun Pharma did, like acquiring Renbaxy? Like, are you being now conservative?
No, actually, the Ranbaxy move was brilliant. I think they were preemptive in what they did. There was no process running. I think, at that point, if it was available at that value, any company in India would have done that deal. It was a value deal. Though there was some overhang of the US regulatory action, the emerging markets, the India presence, the strong brands were huge value. Yeah, so I have to say they out executed everybody else.
Talking about pharma and governance, we can't not talk about US FDA. So, how has been Dr. Reddy's performance on the US FDA at a time when Indian companies and the manufacturing compliance is an issue still?
So I think we had a good track record till 2014. And in 2014, we had a bad inspection and we had multiple problems in our units. And that resulted in a warning letter, I think, issued to us in 2015, covering 3 facilities for different reasons. One of them I thought was a minor one, but we still got a warning letter for that. I would attribute that phase to our own inadequate focus on quality and excellence. I think somewhere in that growth phase, we didn't pay enough attention to our operations. And since then, we have focused a lot on improving our operations, improving safety, quality, productivity, all of those in our operations. This is a journey. It's never done. You have to keep on doing it. If you don't improve every year, you will deteriorate. There is no status quo that you reach a certain level and you'll maintain high quality. It doesn't work that way. We recently didn't have some great inspections. Fortunately, we got our approval status, but it is a warning sign for us, and we are really focused on improving our operations even further. The fact that in India we tolerate a lot in our daily lives. The buses don't come on time, the roads are messy, hygiene is not great. And then you have to go into the plant and maintain the plants to world class levels. We can do it. For example, we have some of the best hotels. They will beat any hotel in terms of service, cleanliness, hygiene, quality, everything. So if we put our mind to it, we can do it, and we are doing it. So, but at the same time, it's a cultural issue that we have to overcome, and we have to be committed to excellence.
And a bulk of the company's revenues come from the US, like almost 40% of the revenues come from US. So do you see US market being as attractive as it was, during the time when Dr. Reddy's was growing?
So every market is competitive. But when you have a branded business, the dynamics of that business is slightly different. You have higher sustainable pricing. In the commodity markets, you compete on price. So comparing a market like India to the US is different because the US is a commodity market. The Indian market is branded market, where once you build a brand, you can sustain it, you can sustain margins, all of that. So structurally, it's a commodity market, and among the commodity markets, it is still the best market.
But do you also see Sun Pharma over executing there or out competing you there in terms of the way they have forwarded into specialty business? Is Dr. Reddy's also going to do the same?
No, the specialty business is a different business. We were also on that journey, but we sold and exited that business during the warning letter period because we had to focus down. We had built a business there, about $100 million of revenue was there, and it was growing, and we were adding to the pipeline. But it required significant investment. And if you see, Sun also has invested more than $1 billion in this. At that time, we kind of exited the specialty business. There is a likelihood we'll enter it again. We are now have the resources, the bandwidth to do that. But each company has its own strategies. Sun has focused on a certain category. We might focus on a different category.
Mr. Prasad, you talked about the whole hiring of your expat CEO and how you and Satish work together. You don't have to necessarily always agree, but just explain to us, how does this dynamics work? A professional CEO, and then there is a promoter family with two very strong individual characters, also hands on in the business.
So each of us play to our strengths. So I'll just briefly describe how it works. Satish is very good at policy, government relationships, external orientation. So he focuses on that, the relationships in the industry associations, policy making, it's interacting with governments, both local and central. And that's something I could do, but I'm not motivated to do that. And my interests are in science, technology, innovation, people, governance, these kind of things. Erez is very good at day-to-day management, holding people accountable, management process, stamina to sit through meetings, all of that. And he does that. So we divide the work in our areas of strength, and we complement each other. So it works as long as you keep your ego in control and give enough space to everybody. It works.
Since we're talking about three people, this is also this is now the third generation who are coming into the business or who's come into the business. Now, some might argue, friends who've seen Akhil closely, that he would rather do, some startups or sports, which is what he's very passionate about. He had a sports venture, in the past. How is the third generation coming into the business? Or is it just going to be Akhil? Or you have two daughters, Satish also has children. So, I mean, how do you see this succession planning vis-a-vis from the family side?
So I think to broadly address this issue, Satish's daughter is also in the business. She's working for the India business in the branded markets. Akhil actually is in a startup. Is even within Dr. Reddy's, the business that he leads is a small business with a lot of potential. So in a way, he is building that business from a small size to our, in 10 years, we want it to be a very sizable business. So he has that runway in front of him. And these are the only two family members involved at this stage. My daughters are not very interested in this business, so they will probably not join this thing. We have to wait for Satish's son, how it'll evolve. But to us, I think who runs the company is And again, a question that we will answer for what is good for the company in the long term and what will help the company flourish. It could be a professional, it could be a family member, but as of now, we haven't made that decision. Family members have roles either way. They can run parts of the business, or be involved in parts of the business, be a board member, and ensure the company is well governed, or just be a shareholder and be happy with the dividends and returns. So one of these three roles the children will play.
So you don't mind being what Mr. Mariwala did with Marico? Let the professionals run the business and his son be a shareholder and follow his own pursuit.
Yeah, I'm at this time open. We don't have any set ideas.
You also talked about employees and how people is something that you personally focus and invest on, the DRL family, so to speak. Do you still run the leadership transformation program in DRL? Are you still getting those desired results? You had a program before. Maybe it's still running because it is expensive for the company to sustain, and so therefore, do the results often outweigh the financial costs that you incur?
Well, I don't look at this as a big investment. I'll tell you why. This leadership program that we have, we call it NHLP, New Horizons Leadership Program. It's a long program, it's an expensive program. We have coaches, all of that. But I think it's an amazing return on investment for us, because once you stretch the mind of an individual, it will never go back to where it was. So you have a lifetime of high performance from an individual, and in many cases it has unlocked their own motivations, and some of them have said that this is not for me. I'm going to go and do an NGO, or I'm going to go and do something else. But in the overall scheme of things, I'm very proud of this program and the impact it has had, and I'm also very proud of our alums who have gone on to do great things in industry.
On research front, you did mention Dr. Anji Reddy and his autobiography, titled as The Unfinished Agenda. So is Dr. Reddy's now finishing that unfinished agenda?
We are making progress in different ways. We have said that we have to innovate to create non-linear value, and we are doing it in a number of ways. We are actually licensing in innovative assets for the markets where we have a presence. We are also building an organic pipeline within Dr. Reddy's in the area of oncology. The third area is also we are doing incremental innovation for many markets. Take an existing product, make it better in some ways, more tolerable, safer, or more efficacious. So, in that sense, innovation is a big part of our agenda today. And hopefully, we'll finish that agenda, which Dr. Reddy spoke about.
What has prevented Indian pharma companies to kind of make a mark in drug discovery? We have had companies like you, Glenmark Pharma, have been investing for so long. Ever since I had started tracking pharma since last 20 years, I have been hearing, investment in R&D, companies spending 6 to 8% of their revenues in R&D, but we have not seen success. Why?
You ask a question which will require an hour to answer, but just I'll try to do it in a few minutes. This is for a generic company. uh, Going into innovation is not a linear journey. It's not like I'm in API formulation, generics, and then I'll do innovation. Innovation is a very different game. Innovation is innovative products or drug discovery is a small number of very large sized bets. If you want to develop a drug all the way from discovery to phase 3, it's, if not billions, it is multiple hundreds of billions or millions of dollars. A generic product is a million, 2 million, you can make a product. You'll develop 20 products, 30 products a year. Here you'll develop one product in 10 years. It's also a very knowledge intensive game and a knowledge field which is accelerating at a very high pace. So the ecosystem for innovation requires a lot of support, and you also need the whole governmental support to build this whole ecosystem. You need private equity players, venture capitalists, sharp university driven incubators. I think we are getting there. I'm bullish. In the next 10 years we will see a lot of innovations come from India. Case in point, IIT Bombay Immune Act, cell and gene therapy innovation. They've innovated for 10 years now. So innovation takes time, takes money, takes luck, all of that. I think we'll get there. We are evolving. We're Not as rapid as the Chinese yet, but I think we will get there. And I'm glad the government is also recognizing this as a strategic sector and putting their mind to it and their money to it.
And the fact that there is no pressure from the investors, maybe that does that make a difference?
The investors actually pressurize not to do it. So if you're increasing your R&D budget, it goes against you. So it's not that investors want it. They've said we invested in you because you're a generic company. Your multiple is based on your earnings. And the more you invest in research, the less will be your earnings, and hence your multiple will be less.
So perhaps, I mean, there is a thought that, you know, R&D focused companies should stay private, because the moment you get listed, it's like running on a treadmill. Quarter on quarter, you have to address shareholders, you have to address the various stakeholders, stock market analysts, and that brings me to the question that, I mean, DRL stock has performed relatively better compared to market, in the recent past. But in the last year, several other pharma companies have fared better. Now, how do you balance this, what your vision, your journey vis-a-vis what the market is constantly expecting you to deliver?
They are our stakeholders, so we have to, ensure that they get healthy returns in their investments, and sense that is there. But we will not compromise the long term for the short term. That is never a principle for us. So we will, invest in building long term value for all our shareholders, and maybe a year this way, that way, but we won't let that dictate our actions.
Because if I ask an analyst, one of the things that inevitably will come up is that, look, the company has $750 million of cash lying with it. What will it do with that cash? I mean, we need to get a clarity on that. So what will you do with that cash? Is it for inorganic opportunities? Is it for capex? What are you planning to do with it? Because it's a sizable sum.
Yeah, certainly inorganic growth is a part of our strategy, and we've been doing regularly inorganic deals. Every year you will see something happening. The fact that today something has not happened doesn't mean it won't happen tomorrow. So, as a company, we do M&A, but we do at the right valuations, the right strategic fit. We won't do it because we have cash. We will not go after spending this money is not. We will do the right. We'll deploy the capital to create a strategic fit, or a growth engine, or something which will add value to the organization.
As you said, you will create long-term value. That's the vision. If I ask you to rank shareholders, doctors or patients, which let's call them consumers, and employees, who would be 1, 2, and then the 3?
Patient first.
Okay.
Doctors maybe next.
Okay.
Employees and shareholders. But I don't want to rank. I'll create value for all of them. If I'm creating value for patients, the shareholders will certainly benefit.
True.
But I may not. The outcome is that value will be created for all of them.
Right.
And if employees are motivated by serving patients, that is also an intangible for them.
True. Because, I read an interview of yours some years back where you said money is and wealth is not the be all and end all. But, and I keep repeating myself in a bit that being a listed company changes the complexion, the vision, everything, because clock starts ticking the moment you ring the bell and you get listed.
It does, and I'm not trivializing that. It is important for us to be responsible to our shareholders. We are responsible to shareholders, but the responsibility is better served by serving patients than by just focusing on short-term profits. If we create long-term value, it will serve the shareholders well, and that's the belief we have. There used to be a quote on Dr. Reddy's whiteboard saying, "Medicines are for people, not for profits." And if you remembered that, the profits never fail to come back to you. The more you remember it, the more your profits would be. So, it is not that it's a dichotomy. It's not patients or shareholders. It is patients and shareholders. But our job is to serve patients. Shareholders will benefit from that.
Don't you think that paradigm is kind of changing? While Dr. Reddy's as a company thinks so, but how many healthcare companies, pharma companies today are thinking like that?
I think all good companies will think like this, irrespective of sector. If they're serving their customers well and they're solving customer problems profitably, patients, I mean, their shareholders will be served well. You can't just be profit oriented without serving your customers well. Then it's a short term thing, it won't last.
Right. So we spoke a lot about the last 40 years. Now, can you gaze the crystal ball and tell us that how do you think what will be the highlights of the next 40 years?
I mean, it's very difficult for me to envisage at that length, but if I look around me, what is happening? I think biology is advancing at a phenomenal pace, driven by technology, IT, advances in computational power, computational low cost of computing, artificial intelligence, all those tools. The precision with which people are able to understand biology is going up, and hence therapies are moving from being small molecules averaged out to a vast population to precision medicine. Precision medicine, not necessarily small molecules, could be proteins, large molecules, genes, gene therapy, and also even whole cells. So modalities are changing as we advance. We are also understanding the human anatomy much better, and hence preventive health is becoming very important. It is a big trend now to look at aging, longevity, prevention, and I think we are in a golden era of unprecedented understanding of the human body and what affects it. And hence, I think I won't be surprised in the next 30, 40 years, people live to 120, 130 years and healthy lives and, be very active. And maybe you will be one of them, Kiran.
Yeah, I'll definitely, at 80, I will definitely see what Dr. Reddy's is doing.
So, from building bridges to building new frontiers in medicines, it's been really, really honor talking to you. Thank you for taking time out and speaking to both Kiran and me and Economic Times. All the best to you, Satish, Team DRL, for the 40 years that has gone by and for the many, many, many more years that lies ahead. I mean, the adventure is just beginning.
Thank you so much for having me, Arijit and Kiran. It was very, stimulating having this conversation with both of you. Thank you so much.
Did you ever guess Anil Kapoor, the Bollywood actor behind One Tuka 4, 4 Tuka 1, and DRL will have a common link? We certainly didn't. But that's the interesting part of a corporate journey, with all the twists and turns and transformation from a $30 million company to a $13 billion colossus. But honestly, I was personally quite surprised by Mr. Prasad's candor. It's not every day that you hear the captain of such a large ship admitting that in the early days they were very entrepreneurial and nimble, and then over time, speed, agility gave way to being predictable, measured in managing risks. Today, DRL's employee base touches 42 countries. Add the number of offices, and the footprint is even wider. That in itself brings its own kind of evolution and complexities. Much like the molecules, it works as a global pharma giant today. DRL was in the news recently for a potential merger with Cipla, a marriage that would have been made in heaven when it came to synergies. But on record, quite understandably, Mr. Prasad did not want to comment on the matter, being a listed company. But again, he was candid enough about the success of a peer like Sun Pharma in acquiring companies at low valuations and turning them around. And we were not so good at it, he himself added. Such frankness is what makes a corner room conversation refreshing, does it not? That's it from my colleague Kiran Somvanshi and me, Arijit Barman, your hosts for this episode. You may even call it Finding the DRL DNA with GV Prasad, the company's co-chairman and managing director. This episode was brought to you by sound designer Amrit Redji and producer Surohini Jain. Executive producers Anupriya Naya, Anirban Chaudhary, and yours truly. Thank you for listening. And if you like this episode, do spread the word on social media and amongst friends, colleagues, and peers. All new episodes of the Morning Brief podcast drop every Tuesday, Thursdays, and Friday. But since you have been craving for more, we are also dropping episodes midweek on Wednesdays as well. The Morning Brief streams on all your favorite audio platforms like Amazon Prime Music, JioSaavn, Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, and of course, ET's own audio platform, ET Play. Have a great week ahead. Till then, goodbye and good luck.